Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Joe Parker with the Santa Barbara Group at Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate, making videos for you to learn more about my hometown of Santa Barbara, Montecito, the whole south coast of Santa Barbara County. That's been my stomping grounds since the beginning of time, as far as I'm considered, and I would love to help you learn more if it's going to become your stomping grounds if you've stumbled across this video because you're thinking about moving to Santa Barbara or Montecito. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of living in Montecito, the exclusive community just to the south of Santa Barbara that's home to many celebrities, the royals, business moguls. It's an amazing place full of all kinds of wonderful features, and we're going to dive right into them. But not only wonderful features, there's also a lot of cons too. I mean, not a lot. Obviously, it's one of the most amazing places in the world to live, but there are some negatives, and so we're not going to hold back on any of those as well. You're going to have a full awareness, understanding of what it's like, the pros and cons of living in Montecito. So without any further ado, let's dive into it and get into the pros about living in Montecito. Number one, outdoor activities. So Montecito, being nestled between the mountains and the ocean, offer up a ton of outdoor activities. If you're into that active lifestyle, you're going to have a lot to choose from. Starting with our mountains, there's an amazing set of hiking trails that you could get into and go right up into the backcountry, where you'll find lots of creeks, waterfalls, hot springs that are bubbling with hot water. Natural, really nice, really amazing spot to go hike. So you've got the mountains to consider. People are also liking mountain biking up there, and even some of these new fancy electric mountain bikes can get you up and then let you bomb the hill coming back down. So if that's something, you know, if you're a really active retired person coming to Santa Barbara and you got a ton of time, maybe picking up biking is something you're going to want to do. Now, in addition to the mountains, we have the ocean, which is another great place to get active. You know, you could paddleboard, you could surf, you could walk the beach, run the beach, even e-bike on the beach at low tide. Really cool activity. I see people doing that all the time. So plenty of outdoor activities. In addition to these, which are generally free if you want to go out and do, you can do things like golf. There's plenty of places to play tennis. Pickleball's becoming really popular around Montecito and other areas of Santa Barbara. So definitely lots to choose from as far as activities go. Number two, excellent education. So if you're moving to Montecito and you have a family and you're thinking about where the kid's going to go to school, this could be one of the reasons why you find yourself searching what it's like to live in Montecito, because the schools here are really, really top-notch, amazing. The main elementary schools are Cold Springs Elementary and Montecito Union. Both top-rated, very, very sought-after schools that produce amazing educational content for their kids, very interactive. And in addition to those two public schools, which are free to attend, you also have Laguna Blanca, which is a private school, world-renowned, top-class, world-class education offered up there. So those are some wonderful options for grade schools. Now, there's no junior highs or middle schools or high schools that are public in Montecito. You do have some private options like Kate School. That's really kind of on the outskirts of Montecito. It's maybe a little bit closer to Carpinteria, but beyond that, there aren't any other middle school options. You're going to be going into Santa Barbara for those, or high school, I should say. There is a college in Montecito, Westmont's a Christian college. It's private. That's a great school. A lot of people come to Montecito just to go to that school, a lot of young kids. So that's something that's also in the community up in the foothills of Montecito. Now, obviously, people are attracted to Montecito just for the natural beauty of it all. I mean, if you think about how idyllic it is, framed between the mountains and the ocean, with all these vistas and this great architecture and these really long driveways lined with 12-foot hedges, all the mystery, who lives behind that? Who lives down there? You know, all these things. The landscaping around all the different estates is usually really over the top and beautiful, lush and green, and you've got the foothills with the native oak trees dotting them, the ocean with the islands. So just the scenic beauty. I mean, every time you leave your property, you're surrounded by all kinds of amazing sights, vistas, beauties, the mountains, the animals that you see. You know, I see hawks flying all the time. You can see owls. I've seen bears actually up in the foothills of Montecito. So the natural beauty is just really stunning and amazing, and it costs extra. This is why Montecito is so expensive. One of the reasons is that it is incredibly beautiful. Another great quality about Montecito is the privacy. Now, the lots tend to be a bit bigger, so you have less density, more space between you and your neighbors. Some of them can be really big, and so you have a ton of space where you don't even know you have a neighbor around you, especially as you get up into the foothills. So the privacy is really important to a lot of the residents, and they are attracted to Montecito because it affords them a lifestyle that gives them this type of privacy where they can be at home and feel like no one's going to bother them. And in addition to that, Montecito tends to be pretty candid and low-key as a population, intermixing with these other high-profile individuals. And so I think it gives them a bit more relaxed feeling when they're out in public. They don't have to worry about, paparazzi popping around the corner and snapping a picture of them. They could go out and have breakfast with their family and not get interrupted by someone who's gawking over their celebrity status and the fact that they're out in public. So between the setup of the properties being so large, with great privacy just from the natural hedging and fencing and mature landscaping and trees and the way the properties are positioned, to also just the way that the culture is and the way that the Montecito population, the community, acts and reacts to people of high celebrity status. Another great thing about Montecito are the unique local businesses. Montecito has two commercial areas down in the lower village of Coast Village Road. This has a bunch of different little boutiques, some really fun, unique local restaurants. You've got a few different options there to choose from, and if that is not enough for you, we also have the upper village, and that as well has different little boutiques, different restaurants, different service providers, but some of these local businesses very unique only to Montecito, and they cater to that community. So things like there's a really cool party planning supply store over by Vaughn's in the lower village, and this store is full of all kinds of unique items that you could create a theme that's really custom to create a really memorable experience at the next event you plan. So these are examples of some of the little local businesses. Besides clothing, there's a little toy store down there near Coast Village Road, a great tennis shop that's been around forever for everybody interested in tennis. So a lot of unique local little businesses that you could go and support and feel really good that you're staying in your own neighborhood, your own community, supporting a local business that's going to help that family who lives in your community as well. Montecito, being here in Southern California, kind of on the edge of Central California and Southern California, has access to tons of great produce. And where you're going to access that as a Montecito resident, if you end up being there, is the Friday Farmers Market down on Coast Village Road. This is where all the farmers locally bring their produce, their vegetables. You could even find meats, nuts, different dairy products that are made locally, typically organic, typically very small batched oriented if it's something that's produced. So these are great ways to get tapped into the local food, the local fruits and vegetables, the local honey. A lot of people have allergies, and Santa Barbara can be really rough on them when they move here and deal with the different pollens that are in the air. But the trick is go to that local farmer's market, get some local honey, and start eating that on a daily basis and get your body ready for that. But it's just one of the great things about Montecito is the access to all this fresh fruit and produce, and typically most of the restaurants will be serving it up in their farm-to-table style dining offerings that they're creating using all this fresh produce, which is really great when it's just barely out of the farm, prepared and on your table. Another great thing about Montecito are the luxurious amenities. Mainly when I'm thinking about these and telling them to you, I'm thinking about places like the Rosewood Miramar, this amazing, really high-end 5-star resort right on the beach that locals can go and utilize. Go in there for a great drink, have a dinner overlooking the ocean, a lot of different ways to enjoy that without actually being a guest staying there at the Rosewood. In addition to that, we also have the San Ysidro Ranch, which is another great little resort up in the foothills of Montecito that has a wonderful restaurant. So those are some of the ways that we fold in a little bit more of this luxury experience. If you're living in the community, you can pretend you're on vacation there too and go to some of these places. And in addition to those places, which are both featured in kind of resorts or hotels, there's a lot of great local restaurants that give you that same experience of having a really nice upscale night out. Now finally, I'd like to end with just the rich cultural scene. not only in Montecito, but in more particularly its neighbor, Santa Barbara. So being in Montecito, you have very close access to Santa Barbara. It's the next town over. Now, Santa Barbara has a very rich cultural scene. So I'm gonna include that as one of the pros of living in Montecito, is having such easy access right into Santa Barbara, where you can enjoy things like the symphony, plays, concerts. We got the Santa Barbara County Bowl, the Arlington Theater, the Granada Theater, the Libero Theater, one of the most legendary theaters in California that's been operating for, I think, 100 years now. They're just having an anniversary. So there's all kinds of stuff happening in Santa Barbara. And in Montecito, you also have the Music Academy of the West, a prestigious music academy that produces great talent, engaging young artists who are learning their craft, becoming masters of whatever instrument they're playing. But in addition to that, it opens up opportunities to go in there for different shows and concerts that they're putting on. All right, now that I got you really fired up on how awesome Montecito is, and I 100% agree with you, it is, but let's be realistic. Not everything is all golden. There's always some negatives, and including Montecito, there are some negatives to being a resident there in that community. And so I'm gonna share with you what they are in case you haven't been considering these, and maybe they're super important to you, and maybe this is something that we should dive into further and evaluate if this is gonna be a deal breaker or not for you in your decision on where you wanna land. So, number one, limited medical access. So the medical facilities in our area typically concentrated in Santa Barbara. It's only about 10 miles away, maybe a little less depending on what part of Montecito you're coming from, but it's not immediately in the community. There's a few little private practice doctor's offices, but they tend to steer more towards elective type procedures. But to get medical help, if you're in an emergency or you need to have just regular doctor visits or some type of procedure, you're gonna probably be going into Santa Barbara. Not too far away, but it's not in the immediate community, and some people feel more comfortable if they're closer to a medical establishment. Another thing about Montecito, it tends to lack sort of this youthful energy. You know, a lot of people like to go to a community that has this youthful vibrance, and I would say Montecito tends to be a bit more, even though it does have a lot of young families because it's attracted those families due to its great elementary schools, it tends to have a vibe of a bit more old school, kind of retired demographic. Some of the restaurants you'll see are loaded with people kind of that demographic, that age group, just a little bit more mature, kind of senior stages of life. So there's just a little bit less of that. Like you really experience it in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara has a much more vibrant, youthful kind of quality to it. I think mainly because of just the more vast variety of housing options and the colleges that are nearby and all the different services that tend to attract more youthful employees. So that could be something that's important for you, not for everybody, but just to understand that may be the vibe that you pick up in Montecito, is a bit more of a more senior, older demographic vibe going on in there. Another thing about Montecito that I notice when I'm driving around looking at properties, kind of previewing the new inventory for people like yourselves that have hired me to go to work for them. You know, I make these videos to educate you on this community that I help people purchase in, and I also make these so that you could get a feel for what I'm like. Maybe, I turn out to be a good fit for us to work together, and this is a great way for you to kind of almost interview me and understand what my style is, and if it's a good match, I would love to hear from you so that we could talk more about what it is you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are. But I'm usually around Montecito every week looking at new inventory, and what I find happens as I'm driving through the community is that there's areas of sporadic cell signal. The cell phone works great in one area and not so great in another area, and maybe no signal at all in another area. So this is something about Montecito. I think it has to do with just the way that the hills undulate and maybe a little lack of cell phone infrastructure up into these foothill areas of Montecito, but nonetheless something to consider, some sporadic connectivity for your cell phone. Another thing about Montecito, there are strict building codes. Now this is across the board in all of the Santa Barbara area, but in particular Montecito has their own architectural board of review, and they're going to scrutinize your plans to make sure that it matches the aesthetics of the community as a whole. So as a homeowner, you don't just have free will to do whatever you want with your property. You do get some guidance from these governing bodies on what they want your project to look like, which can be very frustrating for a lot of people who want to just do it their way, understandable, but Montecito Montecito may not be the place for you if you've got to have it completely customized and you don't like people telling you what you need to change, because that does happen and people find it very frustrating. They end up typically navigating and coming through successfully at the end, but they can be brain scarred from the whole process, which does make the turnkey kind of newer properties even more attractive for people, so they don't have to go through that process. But and on this token, in this same kind of topic of building, that could be another con of Montecito, is that there tends to be construction going on constantly in the community, and the roads are a bit narrow, especially as you get up in the foothills, so you could have big trucks rumbling up, taking up the whole road. If someone next to you is doing construction, these are big properties. The construction projects can last a long time, so you may be living with the nuisance of a neighbor under reconstruction, with all that chaos that comes with it, with the workers and the trucks and the noise. So this is something that happens often in Montecito. You know, when these older properties turn over, you could count on the fact that the new owner is going to be doing a lot of work to it, and it's going to be a construction site. And maybe you're going to be one of those new owners who pick off a property that's going to need to be rehabbed, and you'll be doing the same thing. So it's just something to consider, that there is a lot of construction that goes on in Montecito, and if it's near you, on your street, if you're passing it as you're navigating your community, you know, you may have some impact there. Another thing to consider, I touched on the privacy of Montecito. It's kind of out there, it's away from things, especially on some of the more foothill locations of the community. That privacy also can come with a little bit of solitude and loneliness. So, you know, there's a balance there. People want their privacy, yet they still want to feel connected with a community. And if you're off up in, let's say, like the foothills and down your driveway, and you don't see any neighbors, and you don't have a regular engagement with people, it can start to feel a little bit isolating and lonely. So just something to consider, maybe in the back of your mind whenever you're, if that's important to you, how to work that out. And there's a lot of ways that I can help new people get connected in this community, to help build engagements, relationships with people. So, there are ways to help bridge that gap. If you do like your privacy, but you also need that connectivity, there are things that are available for new members of our community to get plugged into and learn about. And yeah, Montecito is really expensive. There's a high cost of living. Obviously, the housing's some of the most expensive in the whole country. You're also going to have high costs for services like your gardener, your housekeeper, remodeler, your handyman. All these things are going to be more expensive. So it just goes with the territory of living in Montecito. And yes, you probably all have heard about the Montecito mud flow and the fires that have happened in the past. So this is another kind of negative that has kind of lingered over Montecito as of lately, especially since about 5 years ago or so. We had that Montecito mud flow, which was incredibly tragic, a result of a fire that was in the hills and stripped away all the brush. And then a really freak rainstorm came through and dropped a ton of water, and this happened. So the biggest concern I have these days is not that we're going to get another mud flow, but more fires. And so being an area with lots of trees and foothills and rolling streets and whatnot that are tight, the fire issue can be a concern. So this is something that we could talk more about if this is a concern of yours, and I can give you some advice on how to investigate it even further, more closely, to determine if you could feel safe living in a community that does have a risk of wildfire. So these are some of the things that a lot of people are considering when they're choosing where to live in Montecito, or if even Montecito is a place they want to be at all. So this is something to consider for sure. All right, everybody, so there you go, the pros and cons of living in Montecito. I'm Joe Parker with the Santa Barbara Group, Berkshire Hathaway Real Estate, Home Services, California Properties, bringing you this video content so you can learn more about my hometown and hopefully learn more about me. And if it seems like I would be a good fit, I would be honored if you reached out to me and let me help you learn more about this community and help you find the perfect home. So make it a great one. I'm always loading more content. Be sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with your friends so that they too can learn more about this beautiful community here that I'm helping you get familiar with this video. All right, everybody, make it a great one.